Hello, and we're back live from the Turkish Cypriot Culture and Arts Festival 2020 online. And I'm really happy to have Huseyin Hoca with us today, who is the CEO and founder of the Cyprus Islamic Association. And today we're going to be talking about traditions, Turkish Cypriot traditions over the years. First of all, thank you very much for coming on our programme and our festival. It's a pleasure to have you once again. And we're going to be looking at the wealth of knowledge that you have about these things. So first of all, can we start with talking about Sunnets and why in our culture we have Sunnets?
Sunnet comes from the Arabic word sunnah, which means tradition, and it's actually an Abrahamic tradition that all boys are circumcised. Yeah. So very familiar to the Jewish faith and the Muslim faith, all boys are circumcised at usually a young age. The festivals and the traditions in Cyprus on Sunnet would be that once the child has a Sunnet, there'd be a very big festival, or the family would have people come round, food would be cooked. Usually after the boy has been healed, he'd be placed on a horse and he'd be taken around the village, and there'd be lots of entertainment on that day. And it's for the child in Turkish Cypriot culture, it's going into manhood, so he's becoming a man. And it's a very, very big thing in the Turkish Cypriot culture and tradition. And we still have these kind of festivals here. Although it's changed, we don't have children being paraded on horses anymore in London, but people do have like a party and families get together. There's also a religious side of it, because it's a religious obligation to have a circumcision. And still to this day in the UK and in Cyprus, after the circumcision, usually a prayer service is held, a private prayer service in the child's house, where again food is served and people are invited, and thanksgiving is given that they have a son and that the circumcision has taken place.
Yeah, and obviously this is traditions now that we're talking about for boys. So if we go on to girls, with girls, the henna, that's quite a bigger thing, because hennas are used for lots of different events. Can we have a description of what a henna is and maybe what it's used for? Because henna is used for lots of different events, isn't it?
Yes. Henna is a very popular thing that's been used not only in Turkish Cypriot society, but in most of the Asian societies, even non-Muslim communities like Indians as well. It's a big occasion where people use the henna paste to dye their hands or their hair or their feet on different times of the year, depending. It could be done religiously or culturally. Henna in Turkish Cypriot culture is usually done when a child is 6 months old, a girl. So she's been blessed. An elder of the family, usually a nene, or if the nene is not available, they usually have a woman who's very close to the child, and prayers will be read, and then the child's hands and palms and feet are decorated with the henna paste. Usually they also put a gold coin, which is called a lira. Yeah. It's Ottoman coin, and it's placed in the palm of the hand, and then it's tied up, and one usually under the feet. So the child, the henna also represents purity, fertility, and it also represents long life. And the gold coin represents that the child will always have a good and prosperous life.
That's lovely, isn't it?
That's only found in the Turkish Cypriot community. No other communities that were once governed by the Ottoman Empire have this tradition for a child. Yes. And henna is also used as a celebration just before the night of the wedding. So in Turkish and Turkish Cypriot, and a lot of the Muslim cultures, they do have a henna ceremony, a henna ceremony, just before the night of the wedding, yes, or a couple of days before the wedding.
Going on to weddings, obviously weddings have changed through the ages, specifically for Turkish Cypriots. If we go back in time, what was a wedding like 100 years ago in Cyprus?
So we at the moment are in 2020, and if we was to go back 100 years ago, and let's say 1920, which Cyprus was under British administration, yes, where the Ottoman Empire had ceded Cyprus to Britain, although it was not a crown colony, and Turkish Cypriots held very tight and firm to their cultural traditions, and weddings are very, very different to what we have today in the modern Turkish Cypriot community. So a wedding in that time, usually it would have been arranged by the elders of the family. Yeah. So the parents of both sides would come together, and once they agree and find a matching partner, then only the families would arrange this marriage. That's what we call an arranged marriage. Yeah. So they were arranged marriages at the time. Also, the festivities and the celebrations of the marriage would last at least 3 to 7 days. So it was quite an expensive process.
Yes, it was.
And it was a community thing where people would come together. So in smaller villages, for example, the whole community would come together to provide wheat, rice, food, lambs, goats or lambs would be slaughtered because the guests would be, of course, fed. And the process or the celebration would last, as I said, about usually 3 to 7 days. The first day would usually start on a Thursday, where the young girl, the bride-to-be, would be taken to a hammam, a bathhouse, and she would be accompanied by her family female members and also her husband-to-be female members, and they will go to the hammam and they will wash the bride and prepare the bride for the evening, which would be the Thursday going into Friday evening, where they would bring the imam home, the religious leader of the town or the village, and he would then prepare for the marriage ceremony. So in the 1920s, there was no civil marriages. They were all religious marriages. That would be the first day. In the evening, they would do then a kana. We just spoke about kana. Yes. So after the nikah, usually there will be a henna celebration. And this would be only the female members of both parties, and the groom would come in later on. And in part of the tradition, the bride-to-be, she would be dressed in usually something like red, a red long dress, which they call a bindalli, and she would have a red covering. The red also was a superstitious thing to ward off the evil eye, also representing the girl's virginity, yes, and also fertility as well. And what they would do, they would place henna in the palms and the feet and decorate her hands and feet. And again, a gold coin would be put there for prosperity. And there would be a tradition as well where the female's family would sing somber songs, that this would be the last evening that she would be spending in the mother and father's house. Yeah. And it was a tradition that they had to make the bride cry. Up until the 1970s, so just after 1979, 1980, this actually faded away in Turkish Cypriot community. Yes. Kınas became a thing of the past. Mm. And in the last 5 or 10 years now, it's reviving, and we still have Kına parties in the UK, in Australia, and of course in Cyprus, where predominantly Turkish Cypriots live. So it's coming back, and this is due to a lot of the disease and films that people watch today. The revival of Turkish Cypriot arts and also traditions, yes, are coming back, and Kına is still used today.
Part of it. Well, I mean, it's interesting to see that actually it is very much embedded in our traditions and our culture, Turkish Cypriot culture. So it's nice to, hear about that. So it's not something, because some people sometimes think it's something that's come from mainland Turkey, but actually it's a Turkish Cypriot and a Cypriot tradition, which is nice to hear. And obviously, like you said, also when a child is 6 months, that's when they do the Kına as well. And obviously now there's lots of elaborate patterns and decorative ways of doing it, isn't there?
And the other thing what happened was, on the evening of the Kına, once the henna paste has been pasted on the hands, and the family have that small ceremony of crying and making the bride cry, then the groom would come in. No other male member would be allowed in the room, but the groom would come in and he would open the veil and see the bride for the first time. Wow. And he would have his mother then would paste the Kına on his index finger, and a little bit in his palm. Yes. And then the next day, the wedding ceremony would take place.
Yes, but you said that it went on for many, many days.
Yes, and so the next day would be the day when the actual wedding, the groom would be taken to the village square. And while he's in the village square, all his friends would come around him. There'd be music, there'd be drums and zurna, there'd be dancing, different types of dancing would take place. People dancing with glasses on their heads.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
and there'll be different kinds of traditional, but it'd be only male, because men and women were segregated during those times, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And then they would then shave the groom, and they would a family member would come, and the barber would come, and they would shave the groom, and then they would bring his clothes, and then he'd be dressed in his traditional bridal groom.
Yeah.
And then the next day, the wedding actually takes place, where they actually take the bride. The groom goes to the bride's house, usually with a horse, and the bride is placed on the horse, and then she then is proceeded through the village, so the whole village can see the bride go to the groom's house, where there will be a separate party. But again, in that time of period, in the 1920s, right up into the early 1950s, in villages especially, men and women had separate areas where they would celebrate their children's marriage day. Okay. So women would have their celebration somewhere else, and men would celebrate somewhere else.
I mean, it sounds amazing, actually. It was quite an affair. It was almost like a festival, because we're going to go on to talk about festivals and how that's changed. But so that's quite different, isn't it? 100 years ago, how weddings were put together is very different to how it is now.
It is.
Nowadays, which elements do you think we still uphold?
Well, the Kina, as I said, has come back, and we also have the tradition of the bride and groom's family participating in the preparation and arrangements of the wedding. But what we see today's modern Turkish Cypriot weddings has nothing to do with, has no elements of the traditional customs of how marriage took place up to 1950s. And the very interesting thing is that in some remote regions of Cyprus, for example, in the Dilirga area, which is known as Erenköy, these people still had segregated weddings right up until 1976. Wow, the last segregated wedding in Cyprus was in August 1976 in Yeni Erenköy.
So it's actually documented as well, which is good, which is nice. But I think that's what influenced it, the fact that they were segregated. But obviously now, because everybody is in the same place, I think obviously traditions have moved on, and rightly so. But it's quite nice to know about these things, and for young couples out there to dip into their traditions and their culture from the past is quite a nice thing. Obviously, it would probably financially be quite a big affair, wouldn't it?
Because it's quite it would be very expensive
days that they'd have to cover. But obviously, certain elements is quite encouraging, to think about and to do.
It wasn't a very expensive process, because you had to feed your guests, and lots of guests came from other towns and villages as well. And then you'd have to also find a place for them to stay, feeding them in the morning, in the evening, in the afternoon. And also there was a tradition where the groom's family would come to the bride's house, and they would look at the furniture and all the clothing that would be given. So we call this the chayiz.
Yes.
So the bride would take her chayiz to her new house. And this would usually be done on carts in that time. And they would have sandıks, which is like a chest, usually very, very elaborate chests. And all her stuff would be in there, her dresses, her jewellery, yorgan, quilts, all different colours and different homemade rugs. And this would all be taken, and this would actually be displayed, and everybody would see pots, pans. It was very interesting.
Well, I do think a lot of what you're saying, I see in a lot of our folklore dances.
Yeah.
We have these stories retold, like getting the bride ready, the groom ready, having him shaved, the ladies sorting out the embroidery on the rugs. This is all part of our Turkish dancing. Right. So it's quite good that you're actually telling us about it, because I think a lot of the youngsters who do the folklore dancing, this is actually an explanation of what it's about. It's about everyday life, isn't it? And our traditions.
Right. And there is this kind of thing, re-emergence now of our youth trying to go back to the past. And you do see actually some people having traditional weddings and having at least one night, and the Kina is just one part of that.
Yeah, which is a nice thing. Lastly, I'd like to talk about festivals, seeing as we are in our festival, our online festival. How have festivals changed? Did we have a lot of festivals back in the day, about 100 years ago in Cyprus?
So 100 years ago, if we were just talking before the end of the Ottoman Empire, the three festivals that would be celebrated in Cyprus would be the two Eids, the two Bayrams. Yeah. So it would be the Ramazan Bayramı, which was the Bayram that took place after 30 or 29 days of fasting, abstaining from food during the day hours. And then there will be 3 days of celebration. This was a very, very big event in Cyprus. It's not like now. Whole communities would come together, great celebration. A few days before the Bayram, the elders of the family would go shopping. Garments would be made for the children to be worn specifically on that day. Yeah. Everything would be new. And even if they were poor families, they'd make sure that once a year the children would have new garments, new shoes to wear. And usually in the villages, these garments would be used for the two occasions, the two Bayrams. In the cities where people had a higher level of income, they would buy their children garments on both of the Bayrams. Bayram meant people coming together. The first thing they would do on the Bayram morning, the father would take the children, the male children, to the mosque. That would be that was a thing that was overall. Everyone went to the mosque and they would go and perform the morning Bayram namazı. Then on return, before he returns home, he usually would go to his elder, the father of the house, would go and see his mum and dad, and there was the kissing of the hands, which is a very important part. And we've actually kept that to this day. Even in the UK, I see children, they kiss the elders, so they kiss in the hand and putting the hand onto the forehead. And then usually the grandparents would usually have a little pouch made, handmade little pouches with a coin inside to give the children. Money was given. It wasn't like today where you'd buy a gift of clothes. It usually was money, and children would actually look forward to Bayram. The whole street would be very, very colourful. There'd be vendors selling different types of Turkish delights and other sweet dishes. On the Bayram day, there would be a family meal together, and people would be visiting family for the next 3 days. Also, there was religious shrines would be visited on Bayram. So another Turkish Cypriot tradition was that on the third day of the Bayram, because it'd be 3 days of holidays, all families would go and visit the Hala Sultan Tekke in Larnaca, where it was the burial place of the beloved Prophet Muhammad's auntie, and we call her Hala Sultan in Muharram. And that would be another place where people would go together and make a pilgrimage and then give thanks to God. And again, people come together there, celebrating in different ways. People have had picnics on the Salt Lake, and other places would be visited. And also, Turkish Cypriots found a very important element that on the Bayrams, that they visit their deceased loved ones. So on this day, the cemeteries would be cleaned, and everybody would go to the cemeteries on the early hours of Bayram or the day before on Arife Günü, and they would burn incense and they would pour water and say prayers for their loved ones, making them still feel part of the Bayram celebration. So we had two Bayrams. One was the Ramazan Bayramı, and the second is the biggest Bayram, which is called the Pilgrim Hacılar Bayramı or Kurban Bayramı, which was the Bayram of the sacrifice. It's an Abrahamic tradition, and the richer families would sacrifice a goat or a lamb and then feed the poor. Again, families came together. There was lots of entertainment in the streets. There'd be lots of shows, Karagöz shows, the puppet shows. There'd
like
be
entertainment.
Yep, and there'd be lots of live musicians in the streets of Lefkoşa, Mausa, Larnaca, and in the small villages as well. People would get together. In some villages, they would have swings made for young ladies to go and swing and sing together. There'd be musicians. People would sell sherbet and different types of ice cream. And it was a very, very big community event where everybody got together and everybody dressed the best on that day. The other third Bayram at that time was the birthday of the Prophet Muhammad, which we called the Mevlid. Again, in the bigger towns, especially, there'd be celebrations on that day for the whole day, and in the evening it would be concluded with prayers at the mosque. When Turkey was founded as a republic, then we also were introduced and with the different Bayrams like Çocuklar Bayramı, and that became a very, very big celebration in Turkish Cypriot traditional culture as well, which is still to this day.
Yeah, I've actually seen pictures of my parents holding the flags and walking outside. Yeah, so I think that was very much
that's
celebrated.
still to this day as well.
To this day, it's quite a big
And here as well, and all over the world.
It is.
Turkish Cypriot children.
I mean, it's nice to hear because we have kept some of our traditions. When you say these things to me, a lot of them I am familiar with. It's just, I suppose, we don't follow through every single one, but it's nice to see that a lot of our traditions have actually gone through the years and we still have adhered to them, which is great. I did mention it at the beginning, but you are the CEO and the founder of the Cyprus Islamic Association. Can you tell us a little bit about future projects and where we can find you on social media as well?
Thank you. We've got a Facebook page called the Cyprus Islamic Association. We work along with all the other Turkish Cypriot associations, and our aim is to bring back our history, our roots, connect people to their cultural heritage, religious heritage, and also culture as well. As you said, we still hold firm to our traditions and our cultures. I'm really, really pleased to be here in the UK to say that 90% of all Turkish Cypriots in the UK, they have their Sunnet parties. They have their mevlits. They also do Kina for children, even before marriage, even the 6 months Kina. We have actually revived them. We've kept these traditions. We've kept these traditions really, really strong. Yes. And it's even our young ones show a really, really keen interest to keep these. And they're always going to be with us, hopefully. Cyprus Islamic Association, we have lots of projects. Unfortunately, due to COVID, it's been a very challenging and difficult year. But hopefully, in the next 2 months, we'll be doing our winter appeal, and we will be working with other Turkish Cypriot associations in the UK. We'll be doing a food run, hopefully, in December and right into January, February. We're working with the homeless in the UK. We'll be working with Çatı, which is a very, very respected organisation for Turkish Cypriots in the UK. And we're also going to be doing several winter projects in Bangladesh, Egypt, Bosnia, and of course in Cyprus, sending quilts, blankets, and also clothing for poor orphans during the winter months. And then let's hope that once COVID has passed, we can start doing more of our other activities where we can do some community and heritage events.
Yes, I mean, I want to just say at the end of this interview, a big thank you to you, Huseyin Hoca, because really you've been a beacon of hope and really kept the community together and kept it strong throughout these very hard times from March and from before, of course, through your association and all of the things that you do as a Hoja. So I'd like to reach out and say a big thank you to you for all the work that you do in the community. Honestly, you are a commendable character.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for
and I'd like
all
to
that
thank
you do.
you. And I'd like to thank Eurogenç TV. I'd like to thank Eurogenç TV for the hours and efforts they've put in during COVID, and also for organising this and being in partnership with the festival. TCC UK for all their efforts and contributions to the community, especially to Jazeera Association, bringing about a culture, reviving and bringing all our historical facts to our youth in the UK and to in other parts of the world, Australia. People are following us, and let's keep up the good work and enjoy the festival, everyone.
Yes, anyway, that's it from us for the moment. Enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you very much and good evening from Eurogenç TV.